Commander Rasa stood at the edge of the settlement and watched the pale sun climb. The new world had a thin light that made metal shine like old coins. People moved in the streets below him. Children chased a stray drone. Farmers fixed wind arrays. The town smelled of bread and oil and the quiet work of people who had come to build, not fight. Rasa had the look of a man who had learned to carry many small things at once. He was no soldier by trade. He had once been a teacher. Now he kept lists in his head: food, fuel, watch shifts, the names of the children. He walked the packed earth roads each morning. He greeted people by name. He traded a small joke with the baker and a quick plan with the mechanics. His hands were steady and his voice was calm. High above, a sleek Imperial Scout rode the thin sky. It cut the light like a dark blade. The Scout dipped low and sent a survey beam. Rasa saw the reflection on the metal roofs. He felt the familiar cold that comes when someone measures you from far away. The Empire liked to measure. It liked to know who had what, where, and when. Captain Abel watched the Scouts' readouts on a bright panel in his ship. He had the crisp posture of an officer raised inside rules. His uniform was folded without a crease. He believed in the Empire's order. He believed that a settlement should make way for supply lanes and for quiet law. The Scouts' sensors marked the town as small and self-sufficient. Abel sent a routine note across the net. His voice was polite and formal. "Identify yourselves," the message read. "State purpose and compliance. Prepare for inspection." On the ground, a trader stopped his cart when the message reached him. He read the words on a small slate and folded it away like a paper bird. The town council met quick and low in a kitchen that smelled of stew and sweat. Maya, an elder and a healer, wrapped a child's coat tighter and listened as Rasa spoke. "We trade," Rasa said. "We build. We obey the laws where we can. We ask only for space to grow." Others spoke in softer voices. Lila stood at the back. She was young and quick with tools. She had a smile that came when she had fixed something no one else could. She had hidden a small homemade rifle in a crate under her workbench. She hoped she would never need it. She kept it because hope alone had not kept houses standing through the first winter. The Scout sent one small packet more. It was a sealed order, short and tidy. The order read, "Monitor. Enforce compliance." Abel's hand hovered over a button. He liked order and the feeling of authority. He liked knowing a plan would work if he followed steps. He pressed the call to report back to the cruiser. Night came quick and clean. People drew their curtains and closed shutters against the wind. Fires burned low. Rasa walked the lanes. He checked the stores, the radios, and the list of people who would watch the hill. He thought of the trader's cart and the friendly guard who had given a child dried fruit. He thought of the Scouts' lights on the roof. He could not know how small decisions would bloom. At dawn, a flare cut the sky. The Scouts' beam came with the speed of bad news. A small squad from the cruiser landed and moved toward the market. The soldiers were careful. Their boots did not drag. They asked questions and took no smiles for answers. A young guard read a paper and relaxed. The paper said the visit was routine. He let his stance drop. The people in the market smiled and offered bread. Then trouble came from a thin line in the far sand. Hunting ships, dark and fast, split the sky. They moved with purpose. The cruiser had not sent them for a friendly check. They hovered and cut the light. The commander on the ground shoved the paper into his pocket and frowned. Engines thundered and men tightened their grips. The market stopped laughing in an instant. Rasa felt the sky like a weight. He ran to the square and took the center. He did not carry a weapon. He carried a worn notebook and the voice of someone who must make quick laws in a small place. "Listen," he said. His voice was steady, small, and clear. People leaned close. "We did not come to fight. We will not run. We will not surrender our homes. We will show what we have. We will try to keep peace. But if they hit us, we will protect our children. Lila's hands tightened around a crate. She looked at the scout and then at the hill where the hidden rifle slept. Her face was set. The farmers moved to the fences and checked the lines. The children were pulled inside by mothers who said quick prayers. The settlers were not soldiers, but they were not weak either. The hunting ships burned down to the horizon like a line of dark teeth. The convoy that had brought soldiers began to pull back. The scout's beam hummed like a warning. A small officer on the cruiser barked orders into a mic. The net of commands was sharp and cold. Rasa watched the young guard whose fingers had loosened on the rifle strap. He watched the paper in the commander's pocket like a small, floating thing. Then the sky split open with gunfire. A bright line tore across the market and threw dust and metal into the air. A barn roof broke like an old bone. People screamed and ran. Smoke rose. Rasa pushed through the crowd and found a child under a timber. He pulled the child free and wrapped him in a blanket. The boy's eyes were wide and frightened. The scout's call went out to the cruiser and back again. The sealed order had been a thin thing. Somewhere higher up, decisions were made and changed. Rasa felt the town tilt and hold. His wish for quiet had been tested. The decision to stay or flee had been pulled toward a hard edge. He looked at Lila and saw her jaw set. He saw Abel's small figure on the ridge, standing as if he balanced the weight of 1,000 rules. Rasa felt something rise in himself like a new list forming. He would not let the town be taken without a fight. He would not see children hidden in basements die so that a fleet could mark territory. He did not know how far this would go. He only knew what he had to do next. He would gather the council. He would make plans in the dark. The settlement that had come to plant roots would grow a different kind of thing now, a small, fierce readiness. Above, the cruiser's transponder blinked a sealed order again. The sun slid behind a low cloud. The market lay quiet under ash and broken wood. The camera of fate held the town tight and did not blink. The first choice had been made. The world would answer it in fire. Smoke hung low over the lane. Ash crossed the road like thin snow. The morning that followed the strike tasted like metal. Houses still smoked. A child sat on a step and stared at a roof that had fallen in. Someone had carved a small cross on a charred post and left a loaf of bread beside it. Commander Rasa moved slow through the ruins. He kept his head down so the light would not find his face. He checked names on his list. He called out softly when he passed a neighbor. He found a woman who had been digging in the rubble. The woman did not speak. Her hands were steady as if they had been doing hard things all her life. Rasa wrapped a blanket around the child and listened to the radio while the wind blew the smell of fire. The attack had been quick. The cruiser above had chosen a small test. A barn burned. A trader's cart was smashed. The soldiers had left a note where a door had stood open, a small paper with a tidy apology and the stamp of command. The note read like a question, "Do you accept control?" It had meant to show power. It had meant to move fear into the town. Rasa read the note and folded it into his pocket. He felt the paper like a vote against him. He felt the faces of the children as if they were on his palms. He had come to the world to teach and to build. He had not come to count dead. They buried the small things. They cleared splinters and moved broken crates. They pulled nails from wood and set them aside for later. The town worked like a river. People who had been farmers and bakers and mothers learned to move like a single machine when there was need. They fed children first. They moved the old and the very young into the cellar. They patched a roof that would not stand. The work kept hands busy and minds from falling into worse places. When the clean work was done, the council met in the old kitchen. The table was scarred and held cups with dark coffee. Maya, the healer, poured water into a small bowl and passed it to those who sat. Her voice was soft but clear. She had seen many nights like this. She had a small list in her head: wounds, food, who would sleep and who would watch. She listened first. Lila sat at the end. She had oil under her nails and a bandage on one fingertip from the night before. She looked like a woman who had fixed too many things. She had a crate under her bench. Inside that crate was a small rifle she had learned to build from old parts. It was crude. It was honest. She had meant to keep it hidden. Now she set her jaw and did not hide. Jalil and Bilal, two men who had sold parts and fixed radios, spoke of routes and maps and timing. They had found a message on a courier the night before. The man had been careless. He had left a bag in a small shed. Inside the bag lay a folded map that showed a supply depot not far from the settlement. The courier had been captured and then let go. He had been lucky. He did not know the map had been copied. The map had become a promise. Rasa listened to the talk of maps and routes and felt his stomach tighten. The depot was small. It held fuel, tools, and a crate of NAV parts. If they could reach it, they could feed more people for a month. If they could break into its ledgers, they could learn the times the cruiser sent patrols. If they failed, it would cost lives. Maya looked at Rasa. She asked a question that made the room still: if we strike, who will pay the cost? Her voice was not weak. It was an honest thing. No one in the room liked the answer. No one could say they would not lose people. They only could decide how to choose those losses. They formed a covered council that night. It was small and chosen with care. Mechanics who could break a lock without leaving a mark. Radio men who could mimic a tone. A woman who could barter with the proud and give a smile when the law demanded it. Lila was chosen to lead a small raid team. She accepted without a show. She had hands that did machine work and a mind that could think fast. Training was not like the stories in the old books. There were no review drills or parade grounds. There were late nights with crude maps taped to a table, where they practiced slipping a chip into a lock and then taking it out without a sound. There were runs across fields where a pair would carry an empty crate and pretend it held something precious. They learned how to move without leaving tracks. They learned how to speak calm and act like they belonged when they needed to. They also learned to use the Empire's own shape against it. Jalil could read a ledger and find where a clerk liked to tuck small notes. Bilal could guess the time a patrol would shift because he had seen the same man tie his bootlaces at that minute 3 days straight. These were small things. They were human things. They mattered. At dusk, Lila sat under the shelter of the workshop and checked a tiny device. It had a salvaged chip that fit like a key. The device could send a short false authorization to a depot gate and make the locks open for a minute. It would not last. It would be a small window. But the window could let them slip in, grab maps and fuel, and slip out again. She pressed the chip into the slot and watched the light blink. Her hands were steady. She thought of the child under the timber. She thought of bread and the sound of a cracked bell. She thought of the look on the courier's face when he had left that map. The map had felt heavy in her pocket. It felt like a choice. That night they moved. They loaded a small wagon with 2 old men to watch the road and 3 hands that could run and climb. They took the path the courier's map had shown and moved under a moon that tried to hide them. Lila walked front. She carried the device and kept one eye on the sky. The moon was thin but steady. They reached the depot where a single guard slept by a small metal shed. Lila set the device near the lock and breathed slow. The chip fit. The lock ticked. The gate opened like a mouth. Inside they found supply crates stacked like teeth. They took fuel, a crate of spare radio parts, and a sealed ledger that listed patrol times. They moved as ghosts. They left a small marker to show they had been there, a notched board on a post. It was small and meant to be noticed by those who watched. They slid back into the dark and carried the goods home. On the way back, a line of lights moved down the lane farther than usual and faster. The convoy had sent scouts to check the depot. The team tightened, hugged the shadows, and kept moving. Lila felt the night close to her like a hand. She did not look behind. When they reached the settlement, they were quiet and careful. The goods were divided and the ledger was copied. The maps were placed under Ross's care. They had done what they set out to do, and yet the taste in their mouths was not sweet. They had taken from the empire and they had put a small mark on a chain that might grow. They ate hot soup and sat together. The children slept without knowing what had happened. The elders closed the doors and watched the sky. Rossa looked at the ledger and thought of the cruisers that still measured them from above. He knew next moves would be harder. He knew the empire would answer in force. When the covered council met again, a captured courier's face came to mind. He had left the map because he was careless. Now he had started a chain. The map had given them a chance. The chance had led to risk. That risk now moved like a slow animal through the lanes above. At the end of the night, Lila checked the device and found a tiny scratch on the chip. She pressed her palm over it and whispered, "We will not lose more than we must." The words were small and soft and honest. Outside, the sky held a thin watch. The cruiser's transponder blinked, and someone far above traced the names on a list. The settlement slept with a new shape. It had been hit, it had hit back, and the fire the empire had made would teach both sides how to change. The imperial hearing room smelled of disinfectant and old paper. Light came through a high window and cut the air into clean lines. Officers in crisp uniforms sat on raised chairs. Their faces were blank like carved stone. The room was made to make people believe rules could not be broken. On a small screen in a hidden shed, Jalil watched the live feed. He had not slept. The forged seal sat in a neat pile on the table beside him. He tapped his fingers on the wood and read the judge's slow words. The humans had taught themselves to read law the way a locksmith reads a door. Tonight that skill would matter more than a gun. The judge read the charges with a voice that sounded like slow thunder: forgery, unlawful occupation, incitement. He pointed at the colony on the hollow and named its leaders. The public needed an example, he said. That was how the empire kept quiet towns behaving. Maya stood in the hollow and did not look small. Her hair was tied back and her hands were steady. She answered in the empire's formal tone. She knew which words made an officer stop and check a ledger. She used those words as keys. When the judge asked for proof, she did not look worried. She spoke calm and precise. Jalil fed the panel a copy of the wrong authorization Route 73 and a set of forged endorsements. The forged papers were perfect at first glance. They had the right stamps, the right ink, the right marks. Small things the empire did not check often had been copied from real documents. The judge read them and frowned. He asked his clerks to verify. The clerks typed and checked and found tiny mismatches that should not have mattered. The judge's voice changed. He paused and asked for more time. A pause is dangerous in a room built on certainty. When the empire pauses, men start to think. The judge's robe shifted. A captain in the back tapped his tablet and cursed softly. The admiral in charge of the sector wanted a show of force. He ordered a strike on a neutral supply station to warn other colonies. The order went out like a hammer. In the hidden shed, Zara's hands moved fast. She sent the forged document to hidden posts across the network. She did not send it to every officer. Too many eyes could find a difference. She sent it only to places where clerks were tired and checks were light. The plan was to make many small openings, not one big lie. The empire answered with sharp metal. The supply station burned under a clean sky. People on the feed watched a market vanish in a howl of flame. The strike had been loud and public. It was meant to frighten. It did frighten. Men in uniforms looked at each other and rubbed their faces. The empire had shown it would hurt civilians to stop a small rule from spreading. But the strike also showed a new fear. After the market burned, a strange thing happened on the Admiral's flagship. A faint melody played over a channel that should only carry commands. It sounded like a child's song. Officers stared at panels. The melody was small and wrong. It was also a sign that someone was listening in a way the Admiral had not planned. Jalil smiled when he heard the melody. It was a code the humans had used before. It disguised messages as laughter and music. For the Empire it was noise. For the humans it was a key. The Admiral's men could not know that the song meant a file hidden deep in archives would be opened. The song was a small knife. While the Empire scrambled, the humans moved. They used forged manifests to fetch small crates from a station that had not been locked tight. They opened vaults and took ledgers. They copied shipment times and patrol routes. Each small theft taught them more about the Empire's timing and fear. Inside the hearing room, the judge tried to stitch his law back together. He demanded a final verification. He wanted a clean signature and a chain of custody. Maya spoke again and named a clause the judge had not expected her to cite. The clause tied convoy rights to a formal ritual and to a window of hours. If that window had closed, the convoy had acted outside its right. The judge hesitated. His clerks checked and found a line missing. Someone in the hall muttered. Doubt spread like cold fog. Outside the hall, governors and captains argued. One group wanted swift punishment. Another urged caution. The Admiral ordered a public inquiry but then called for more patrols. Orders piled on orders and the fleet slowed. The Empire's machine was made to run smooth. When parts stopped fitting, the whole became clumsy. The humans used the clumsy moments well. They staged a public freeing of prisoners at a relay hub. It was messy and loud. They wanted the world to see Imperial men give up their power in front of their own laws. The video feeds showed guards stunned when a registrar refused to sign a detention list because the list looked wrong. Officers looked to their hollows for confirmation and found a gap. The sight of a uniformed man lowering his weapon in public did more to break morale than a dozen raids. Then a single, dangerous thing happened. A ledger the humans copied named a famous admiral as the signer of a hidden order. The admiral's signature was clean and old. The evidence should have been solid. Yet when the admiral's crew checked the line, their systems flagged an inconsistency. The bridge froze. A message came back down the chain, verify signature. The admiral's voice, which had once been a cliff, trembled for the first time. In the hub below, a small human unit ran across the floor. They carried forged papers and a set of real seals stolen long ago. Their legs moved fast. They had a plan to place a call that would force an inspector to check a manual ledger in public. If the inspector read the ledger and found the same name, and if the admiral could not deny it, the Empire's order could break in a single, public moment. Jalil watched the bridge on his screen. His heart beat like a hammer. The admiral's crew fumbled. A captain asked for verification on a channel that usually carried no questions. The admiral barked and then waited. Waiting was new and dangerous for him. Outside, the human team reached the hub stairs. Their boots did not make a sound on the metal. They pushed through a door and saw a registrar reading a list. The man blinked at a name and then looked up. His face went pale. He called for a clerk to fetch a book that had been boxed in a corner. The clerk ran. The registrar turned to the camera and paused. The hall waited. Back in the hidden shed, Jalil felt the shed tilt. He had pulled one thread and watched the Empire stumble. The judge in the hearing room tapped a pen too many times. The admiral's bridge sent the word again, verify. The sound was small and terrible. The human unit outside the hub held its breath. The sheet of paper in their hand had a name that smelled like a finished sentence. If the clerk returned with the ledger and the name matched, the admiral's order would be proof and the Empire would burn its own papers in a public fire of shame. The clerk ran back with the book. He opened it and found the line. His hand shook as he read the name aloud. The camera caught the moment and sent it across channels. On the Admiral's Bridge, a man lost a color in his face. The judge in the hearing room stopped. The empire had taught its own people to follow paper. Now paper had turned on them. Jalil closed his eyes for a long breath. The thread was pulled. The cloth began to fray. The empire had been taught a dangerous lesson, its rules could be used as weapons. The humans had learned that lesson too. Tonight their work had changed the shape of the war. Outside, the sky hummed with distant engines. Inside, the hearing room held a silence that was new and full of small things. Night fell hard and black over the low road. The freighter lights moved slow like tired eyes. The settlement's people watched from windows and from cracks in cellar doors. They had learned to listen for engines and read the sky. Tonight would teach them something new. Lila walked with a crate on her shoulder. It was not heavy, but she kept it close as if it were a child. The crate smelled of oil and old wire. Inside was a small device she had built with Bilal and Jalil. It was a crude EMP rig, nothing like a warship bomb. It fit in two hands and hummed with quiet power. The device could black out a convoy's engines for seconds. That was all they needed. They did not want murder. They wanted chance. They wanted time to take supplies, to free prisoners, to break a chain. Lila thought of the child who had sat under a fallen roof. She thought of bread and lists and the ledger that still sat under Ross's care. She thought of the little boy who laughed when a crate opened and found dried fruit. That was why they learned to make strange machines from spoons and radio coils. The plan was small and staged. A convoy would stop at a false distress call along the road. A merchant would shout about a broken axle. Soldiers would leave their rigs and come close. Then the device would sing its short song and the convoy would die for a breath. Wheels would lock. Radios would go fat and empty. Men would scramble. In that pocket the humans would move. Zara had made another trick. She had forged a maintenance order that would look real to a station clerk. The order told a depot to open a gate for a small supply run. The clerk would not ask many questions. Clerks did not ask when orders looked clean. The forged paper would get them maps and fuel and, more importantly, a public ledger that would show which routes the empire trusted. They practiced under a moon that hid its face. The farmers learned to run and to haul nets without sound. The mechanics learned to set a mirror array and angle it so a patrol's sensors would mistake a fence line for a live vehicle. Children practiced being invisible by holding their breaths. The whole town moved like a single animal that had learned to be clever. The convoy came on a late hour. It moved slow and confident. Soldiers laughed and checked crates. The young guard who had once given a child dried fruit leaned on a crate and smoked. He trusted paper and warm hands now. He did not look for tricks. Lila crept from the ditch and set the device under the axle. Her fingers were steady. She thought of nothing but the click the switch might make. Bilal covered the lane with a mirror panel. The sky on the panel threw a false glare into the convoy's sensors. The world on the screens shifted by a fraction and the convoy's tech read two things at once, light and noise and doubt. Lila pressed the button. The device breathed out a soft pulse. Engines hiccuped. Lights went dim. The convoy staggered like a drunk. Men swore and reached for radios that answered only with a flat chirp. Wheels locked. The first truck slid and hit a shallow net they had set. Men tumbled. The mirror made the sensors blink in the wrong place. Confusion spread like spilled grain. Humans moved then. They ran through the dust and took what they needed. They did not slaughter. They did not burn. They took fuel and a crate of spare converters. They took a small box of medical supplies. They left a note folded into a neat square. The note read, "We took what we needed. We will not forget." The convoy's commander cursed and raised his voice, but the sky was quiet. The convoy's radios were still dead. The news spread fast. A public video reached nearby stations. It showed soldiers trapped in nets and villagers carrying crates. The empire's image of clean, ordered power was dented. People in other towns cheered in secret. People who had once bowed to the empire now whispered of hope. But the empire answered with a cold hand. A cruiser struck a market at dawn. Its beam tore through stalls and left ash and glass. The strike was meant to show that tricks would meet fire. The town that burned was not the one that had taken fuel. It was a market of people who sold cloth and bread. Mothers wept openly in the street. The human crew watched the feed in silence and felt a cold anger wake like a beast. Arguments rose in the meeting place. Some called for direct revenge. They wanted to take a cruiser, to burn the admiral's name. Others said revenge would make them the thing that had burned the market. Rasa listened and weighed the words. He held the ledger and looked at the maps. The choices were hard and small and terrible. They chose to widen their tactics, not to follow fire with fire. Jalil and Zara planned a larger trick. They would mix sabotage with a public act that would shame an officer. They would free prisoners in a relay hub and show the world on stolen feeds that imperial clerks had signed wrong papers. They would not hide the truth. They would make the empire see its own errors on screens where everyone could watch. The raid at the relay hub was messy and brave. Lila led a small team through a maintenance hatch. Zara made the clerk's terminal show a maintenance request. Bilal cut a line and Jalil fed a mirror image of a file into the registrar's console. The registrar looked at his screen and blinked. Guards moved slow because their orders said to check twice. The humans struck like a tide while the men hesitated. Prison gates opened. Men who had been beaten and used walked out like ghosts. They cried and hugged and could not speak. The feeds showed them walking down the hub stairs into sunlight. Across many worlds, people watched the images and felt their anger shift from fear to something like fury and pride. The Empire's officers felt their faces burn with shame. They had been shown weak on their own nets. A captain who had once barked orders now pressed his hand to the screen and watched a recording where a registrar refused to sign a detention list because the signature does not match. That moment cut through the chain of command like a blade. In the Admiral's tower, a message went up the chain. Secure order. Restore honor. The Admiral's voice came through, stiff and full of hate. The Empire would strike back hard, he promised. He did not see the small box already slipped into his signal array. It hummed softly. It looked like nothing to the machines that checked for weight. It waited like a sleeping insect. On the freighter that carried the humans away, Jalil checked his hands. He saw soot under his nails. He felt pride and a tired shame mixed together. Their tricks had worked. They had freed prisoners. They had stolen supplies. They had shown that paper and code could be bent and that a mirror and a child's laugh could break a soldier's day. But they had also made enemies with teeth. The Admiral's vow like a thunderclap echoed in their heads. Bilal looked at the small device in the crate and felt its hum like a heartbeat. He did not know what would come when the Admiral answered. He only knew the world had changed. The war would hear them now and it would answer. The freighter left the light lanes like a shadow pulled home. Behind it, the Admiral's tower sent a signal that trembled with a promise. The small box in that tower waited and hummed. The next night would not be quiet. Dawn came like a hush. The launch field smelled of oil and cold metal. People moved quietly. Trucks rolled with food. Small ships waited on the strip like tired birds. Everyone knew this day might change everything. Rasa walked the line. He held the forged files in his hand. The papers were thin and many. Each one had been copied, stamped, and hidden for weeks. Zara checked the transmitters. Her fingers moved calm and quick. Jalil tuned a mimic voice until the words fit like a borrowed uniform. Lila held the small humming device like a sleeping animal. Bilal checked engines and strapped down fuel. Maya tended a crate of bandages. They all had parts to play. They had a plan that was not loud. It was a net of many small things. Jalil's fake orders would slow patrols. Zara's forged manifests would open gates for a minute. Lila's device would make a tower taste its own commands and blink. The mimic voice would make bridges hesitate. And Rasa would broadcast the Admiral's ledger across public nets at the right time. If the fleet could not trust commands, the Admiral would be only a man in a room. At first light the human flotilla rose. Ships schemed low under cloud. The crate hummed in the hold like a heart. On a distant bridge, Lieutenant Kor watched traffic and felt a hollow in his chest. He had seen the fleet stutter before. He rubbed his face and checked logs. He had made mistakes that led here. He did not know his hand would be part of this last day. The plan began like the turning of a key. A relay tower blinked fake maintenance. A cruiser got a slow handshake. A convoy received 2 orders at once. Men on decks frowned and reached for manuals. Jalil's voice said the Admiral wanted verification. The bridge paused. That pause traveled. Lila's device woke at the moment the forged ledger went live. It sent a quick pulse into the Admiral's signal array. The tall tower's system stuttered like a tired animal. Screens in the Admiral's hub flickered. Consoles showed old routines. The Admiral's voice came through, but it sounded thin, doubled, then cut. Captains on other decks heard orders that did not match their displays. Someone shouted, "Verify." The word spread. Rasa put the ledger on the public net. He did not shout. He let the facts speak. The file showed approvals for strikes, lists of forbidden towns, and a record of punishments. The Admiral had ordered cruel acts and hidden them in plain paper. The public channels, once obedient, filled with the ledger. Traders, clerks, and neutral governors watched. Faces changed on screens. Some dropped their flags. On one cruiser a captain stood in the bridge light and read. He turned the paper over in his hands as if he could fold it into something softer. He looked at his crew. He looked at the Admiral's face in a hollow. He set down his cup and ordered a halt. That single halt had weight. It became a small mutiny. Elsewhere, the humming device did the rest. It did not blow the tower up. It made it pause and replay. It made the Admiral's bridge watch old commands as if ghosts walked the screens. The fleet lost its perfect rhythm. When orders came, some obeyed. Some questioned. A few turned engines away. The Empire's neat lines untied like ropes left loose. The humans moved fast. Teams that had waited for this window rushed into hubs and supply yards. They opened gates, freed prisoners, and took control of supply trucks. The freed men stumbled into sunlight with blank faces. Cameras caught them and the images went across worlds. People saw the Empire's guards lowered and men walk free. The sight gave others courage. But the victory came with a heavy sound. The Admiral's men answered with force in places that did not matter to strategy. A cruiser struck a farming town as a warning. Fire and ash fell. Mothers held children and cried. Rasa felt the taste of smoke in his mouth. He had hoped to avoid this. He had hoped their careful plan would keep civilians safe. The Empire chose cruelty anyway. When the final action finished, the Human Council gathered in a long tent. They had captured officers. Some were confused and scared. Some were proud and cruel. The council sat with maps and the ledger and the faces of the living and the dead. Voices rose and fell. The question was blunt and sharp, what to do with those who gave orders to burn markets? A man who had lost a child wanted a simple answer. Kill them, he said. And the chance they will do it again. A woman who had hidden children in cellars said something else. We will be what we are not, she said. If we kill like them, we burn what they could not. We must be careful. Maya looked at the ledger and then at the captured officers. Her hands were steady but her eyes were tired. We will hold trials, she said. We will show what they did. We will not let revenge erase what we build. But we will make sure they cannot lead men to burn again. The council chose courts. They made panels with freed prisoners, neutral governors, and elders. They released men who had been forced to follow orders and punished those who signed the cruel pages. Some officers were imprisoned. Some were stripped of rank and sent to work rebuilding the towns they had ordered destroyed. A few faced death for crimes that broke every law of mercy. The choices left scars. Men who had made hard decisions at the council found sleep difficult. Lila could not stop seeing the child under the timber. Bilal drank little and worked more. Rasa walked the roads and listened to people talk of how justice felt like both light and a hot brand. The world watched. Some systems declared their own councils. Traders flew new flags. The empire's map was no longer flat. It had ragged edges and places of new rule. The humans who had started the change set up wells and workshops. They taught people how to read seals and check ledgers. They taught small towns how to verify orders. At night, after the trials and the rebuilding, Rasa sat on a low wall and watched children play with a toy they had found in a crate. Lila sat beside him and laughed a small exhausted laugh as a child broke a brittle plastic soldier and cried for the lost toy. The life of making and settling had come back in small pieces. Far away, a faint signal blinked on a relay. It was not a voice they knew. It sent 3 clean words in a language none of them spoke. The words were an offer and a warning both. Zara heard it and felt a chill in her bones. Rasa stood and watched the stars. He thought of the choice they had made to fight and the choice to be merciful at the end. He felt the weight of both. The settlement would rebuild. The people would plant and teach and trade. They had won a place to live. They had lost some softness for it. He did not know what the future would bring. He only knew this: they came to settle, not to lose. They had learned to fight. Now they must learn how to keep what they had taken back. The sky held a new noise. The world turned, and the children kept playing.